Well, hey guys, I am so glad you're with us today. We have the privilege of having and interviewing a good friend of mine, Ray Miner. Ray Miner, hopefully I'm rocking the haircut you gave me yesterday.
Yes,
well.
You're a good poster.
And there was a little bit of debate online whether or not I should go with this mustache or leave the goatee. I didn't listen to any of them. I went with the mustache. So y'all got a problem, you got to take it up with this guy. But I do want to take a minute and I want to introduce to you Ray Miner. It's funny to actually look at somebody's accolades and things that they've accomplished when you've only known them. Like I've known you as a friend for what, 20 years? 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
But I do think it's important for the interview to just touch on some of Ray's background. And so we'll start present day. You are the founder and owner of Extreme Extingency. You teach concealed carry. I'll start again. You teach conceal and carry. You're a conceal and carry constructor. You're a licensed firearms instructor with the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. You are a certified NRA pistol instructor, an NRA personal protection and home instructor. You are a Utah certified concealed carry instructor and an Illinois State Law Enforcement Training Board certified law enforcement range instructor. You had 19 years and 4 months in the Illinois State Police you retired a master sergeant there. Your patrol districts changed. You were in Chicago. You were in District 13, Zone 7. You were criminal investigations. District 13, you're a public information and education training officer. You're a sergeant of one of the coolest things, the Motorcycle Enforcement Bureau, right? Get to drive those Harleys up and down the interstate. And you're a master sergeant, District 13 Patrol and District Administrative Command. So you were in charge of people, responsible. Before the state police, you did 2 years and 6 months as a deputy sheriff in the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. Before that, you were a West Frankfort patrolman for 3 years and 9 months. You were also a patrolman for 5 years and 2 months at Benton. How many total years is that in law enforcement?
Yeah, just over 30.
Just over 30 years in law enforcement. You have a master's degree in legal studies, and you got that from Southern Illinois School of Law. You went to Rockford University and have a master's degree there as well, and the Master of the Arts in Teaching and Instructional Strategies. You have a bachelor's degree, education, training, and development, occupational specialty, police science, and police administration. Got to be one of the coolest things that I did not know about you. You are a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu 2-stripe blue belt, and then things that we've covered already, but you are a licensed firearm instructor for Utah, Illinois State Law Enforcement Training Board. You're also a ham radio. You have a general license in ham radio, so you know how to communicate people all over the world, right? And you founded something called the Southern Illinois Chapter of Murdered Children. And so while I'm thankful for all of those things that you've done, I'm really thankful, one, that you're my friend and you're my barber. It's been an honor.
For your friendship.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, it's been so good. I promised our online crowd that today you were going to share a story that was near and dear to your heart. And right before the broadcast, one of the things before we get into your story of tragedy and triumph, I want you to encourage people who are a little apprehensive in talking to people who have went through a tragedy. So you had we're going to get into the story in a minute, but you went into, your son was murdered, and people don't want to talk about that to you. They're afraid for some reason. That came up. And one of the things that I never dreamed of or never even thought about was the fact that you want to talk about that. Would you explain that a little bit?
Well, one of for any parent who has lost a child, one of the hardest things is, one, you don't want people to forget your child. You remember them. The whole rest of your life, as long as you draw breath, you're going to miss them and love them and care about them, and you're going to want to do things for them. And it's hard. Once they're gone, you can't buy them gifts on their birthdays. You can't celebrate the birthdays. All of those things, and it is truly a blessing to parents who have lost a child when others remember, when others come up to you and say, Ray, I was thinking about you today. I know that your son would have been 41 today, or if they just drop you a text message or just say, hey, thinking about you today because I know that your heart's still aching. Because the truth is, if I live to be 90 years old, or longer, who knows in today's world, I will always miss him. I will, and I've been truly blessed. I mean, the Lord has blessed me. But even now, and my son's been gone 41 years, on his birthday was back February the 10th, on the anniversary of when he died. I mean, all of those things are always going to come up. And if anything, probably one of the things that probably, it sort of breaks my heart when people that are close to me tell me, oh, Ray, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. I forgot that happened. I remember it now after you've said it, but I'd forgotten it. And the truth is parents, well, just recently, there was a tragedy in Benton, and my daughter, she wanted to go up and talk to the family and say something to them. And she said, I don't want it to feel like I'm bringing it up all the time. They're dealing with it enough all the time. And I said, JC, those parents want to hear that. They want to know other people love them. They love their children, love their family, and love their family member that's gone. So you truly are. So if I was to do anything, I would encourage, if you think about it, that maybe I should talk to them or maybe I should say something, do it. By all means, do it.
Yeah, and that's so helpful because so many people who haven't lost kids, we don't know what to say, we don't know how to say, I remember a time when Angie and I were driving up in the driveway to the very first mother that we had ever known that had a miscarriage, that I'd ever been a pastor of. And I'm sitting there before I shut the car off, and she looks at me and she goes, what's the matter? I said, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say in this situation. And she says, you don't have to say anything other than I love you and that I care. And so just as a reminder to us, and you listen to this broadcast, you're going to know people who went through tragedy. And it's a great reminder from someone who's been through a tragedy that lost loved ones, we don't want to forget them. We don't want them to be forgotten. And so, Ray, we are glad that you're here with us today, sharing this story. I want to give you the opportunity, would you tell us the story, your story, how your son was murdered by a babysitter, the impact it had on your life? Just kind of give us the whole spectrum. Then we're going to come back in and dive into some questions. Okay. But tell us your story. Tell me first, what was your son's name?
My son was Frankie Miner. He was my second child. I had two boys. In fact, I was a child with a child. I graduated high school. Right shortly after graduation, I got married to my son's mother, and we had our first child. Within a short time, she was pregnant again. Not really expected. I mean, we was hoping to have two boys, but I don't know that we expect them to be quite that close together, but they were. I was a young man. My entire family had served and worked in the coal mining industry. In fact, pretty much every adult male in my family either worked in the coal mining sector or in the coal mining industry or directly underground in the mines. And I expected that would be the path that I would take. In fact, people asked me at what point did I know I was going to be a police officer. I said, well, I didn't know in the beginning that I was going to spend my life in law enforcement. But so I, like many people in my family, I expected to spend my career working in the coal mines and the coal mining industry. Left high school while my son was born, or the first son was born. I entered college as a mining technology major. And I landed a job working in the mining industry, selling mining equipment and mining parts and stuff for a company called Lee Norris. They built roof drills and continuous miners. And when our second son was born, of course, both my wife and I at the time worked, and we had to have a babysitter. And my son, the first child, my oldest son, was old enough that he could go to daycare. But the little guy, he wasn't old enough to go to daycare yet, so we had to find a babysitter. And we thought we did everything right. We really did. She babysat other children, had other children had other parents I could talk to about. Her husband worked in the mining industry too, so I knew him through the mining industry. He worked for a company called Gooding Rubber. And, I went and met her. I even took my mom with me, and when we interviewed her and asked her questions and stuff, which I've since now I tell people they should ask other questions than what I did. But I thought I was doing everything right. Nice home. Well, everything about it was, to the most part, you would have thought everything was right. And scary thing was about she'd been watching Frankie for a couple months whenever some things started becoming odd. I can look back. That's part of why I dedicated my life to this, was because I can look back and say, he would cry when I drop him off. He didn't want to be nothing like any of my other son had done, or any of the other people that watched him. But because he was a very happy-go-lucky, very friendly child, very happy child. What happened was she was watching Frankie and her daughter and another family's daughter who was older, in kindergarten at the time. But my wife dropped Frankie off that morning. I went to work. She went to work. I was actually at a coal mine in Wabash County, and whenever I was told that something had happened, my son was at the hospital and they were getting ready to fly him out. So of course I'm hustling back as fast as I can. I get to the hospital about the same time, believe it or not, that the helicopter was landing. Went inside. The minute I got there, I knew something was up. There was 2 investigators there from the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, one from the city of Benton. The doctors were already, and immediately, before I could even go in to see my son, they shuffled me into a room, isolated me away from everybody, and started questioning me about what happened to my son. Because at that time, obviously, whenever a child is injured like this, first people they look at is the parents.
Sure.
And I didn't know this, but they'd already been drilling my wife for 30 minutes or better already. And they weren't even drilling the babysitter much. They got a statement from the babysitter. The babysitter said that he was fine, that nothing happened, and just all of a sudden he blacked out. Well, of course, the investigation goes on, and after a period, he gets flew to Cardinal Glen Hospital. The minute we get there at Cardinal Glen Hospital, same thing. The hospital people there, they're interviewing me. They bring in some special child abuse investigators, and
they're looking at you like you did this.
They thought I did it. Or that was because I was the focal point of the investigation, and it broke my heart. For one, I would like to have been spending those last few hours with my child. Instead, I was being drilled. And actually, we were probably the focus of the investigation until the pathology reports and everything came out. When the pathology reports came out, they found out that, to finish his story, that night the doctors came to us and told us that it was very unlikely he was going to live. He'd already had what they call non-responsive pupils and stuff, or doll eyes and stuff, and they'd taped his eyelids shut so that because his eyes wouldn't. So if he did survive or anything, and then within about 48 hours, he was at the point where they said he's never going to survive on his own. They said you could continue this forever, but the truth is the only thing keeping him alive is his nerves. As long as you keep oxygen to him, he's going to continue to breathe. He will probably do this for, like I said, maybe months, maybe years. And the doctors and the team of neural people up there basically said, the best thing to do would be to consider shutting the oxygen down. So on Friday morning of November the 4th, by that time a pastor had traveled up from my grandmother's church. We'd had the little boy dedicated. A nurse from the chapel there from the Cardinal Glen Hospital came in and dedicated him. And that morning, they shut the oxygen down, and we watched him pass. So basically, in my arms and in my wife's arms. Got home that night. Of course, then the weekend was going. We make arrangements for the funeral and everything, and I wasn't going to have a visitation or anything. We were just going to have a visitation and then a burial all on Sunday, and then. On Monday morning, we got the call from the pathologist in St. Louis, and she told us that my son had been murdered, that his injuries had to have happened within about a 30-minute period of him being brought to the hospital because he wouldn't have ever survived. Basically,
at a time when he was with the babysitter.
Yeah. And then, of course, I mean, I find out more later because I get access to the reports and stuff. But basically, she said that she'd only saw one injury this bad on a child, and that was a child that fell out of a 5-story window. And she said it was basically consistent with a whipping action. His skull was fractured from just behind his right eye all the way around to his left ear.
Whipping meaning not spanking.
Yeah, whipping meaning she and actually later the babysitter actually admitted to it, but she said it would have been if she would have like swinging a ball bat or swinging him down. The whipping action of his body with his head is all that could have caused that. Detached his right eye from his retina, fractured his skull, like I said, and ruptured his kidney, all in at the point of impact. Later, the investigation actually, she had a couple different stories. One that she had fell out of the high chair, and then one that she had knocked him over in the high chair, and then in her third interview, she finally just admitted that that she was trying to get him to stop crying. He wouldn't cry. So she grabbed him by the ankles, threw him down, and then he immediately was unconscious. Then later they interviewed the little girl. Like I said, there was a little girl there that was 5 years old. She didn't see it, but she said that she had told the police officers that when she carried my son out to the car, she carried him by one arm and then threw him in the back seat, and then took him to the hospital. And the little girl said it was like she was carrying a rag doll. So it was, then of course, obviously by the time trial comes up, she has another story that they had made up, that a rocking chair had fallen over on her, a bunch of different things. But about 2 weeks through a long trial, I felt she gets convicted of involuntary manslaughter, which they asked for murder, said she should have got murder. The murder is what says, murder is what the death certificate says, but that's what the state's attorney was pushing was for a murder charge. Conviction was involuntary manslaughter, which basically means that, yeah, she did it, but she didn't mean to. His thoughts were that there's no way anybody would know, they would know that type of action would have killed a child, and they shouldn't, But then, of course, everybody can talk about the judicial system. She was convicted, given 3 days, given 3 years probation, $1,000 fine, 3 nights in the county jail on the anniversary of the offense, and just blew my family away. It was like, how could this happen?
So people need to hear what you just said, right?
Yeah.
I was going to do this, and I didn't, but I was going to bring $1,000. I was going to lay it here on this table, and I wanted people to see that judicial system, how it failed in that moment.
Yeah.
Because if you were to tell me 3 days in jail, you told me this the other day when you cut my hair, $1,000 fine, 3 days in jail, 3 years probation.
Yeah.
Think about all of your children right now and how valuable they are to you, and what that penalty must have screamed to you.
Oh, it was a total injustice. It even got some national attention, and people were even writing. I've got copies of letters where one guy wrote into the Southern saying, "This is the most unbelievable thing you'd ever heard. If I ever commit the act of murder, which isn't likely because I'm in my 70s, but I'm going to come to Franklin County to do it." That's what. I can imagine. Yeah, that's what. So there was some national outcry, but it was within the parameters of what the judge could do at the time, and that's why it's so important we think about that when we elect our judges, because they got to do justice. They got to be just people. But that's what happened. So basically, 2 things happened. One was I knew nothing about the law enforcement system. I knew nothing about the criminal justice system. I didn't understand any of it. Didn't understand how we could be subpoenaed and kept out of the courtroom, because even though we were subpoenaed by the defense, what that did was that sequestered us out of the court. So we couldn't hear the testimony of the pathologist. We couldn't see all the stuff that was going on.
Your child dies,
Yeah,
and there's a trial going on, and you can't hear parts of
I
this
can't
trial.
hear any of it. I am banned from the courtroom.
How do you not tear down a door and get in a courtroom? Because you have to want to do that.
Oh, I did. Yeah, but that was the law, and that's what the bailiffs are there and stuff, is to keep me, keep my mom, keep my grandmother and grandfather, my parents. We were all sequestered for the most part. My dad was allowed in, and my mom's mother was allowed in. So that was the only two family members that was allowed in the courtroom. All the rest of them was subpoenaed by her attorney, with no intent of ever calling us to the stand. It was just to keep us out of the courtroom. Mm. So everything about it just seemed like was an injustice to me. Then, of course, so I immediately thought, you know what, I changed my major in college. The very next semester, I went into the criminal justice program at Red Lake College, dropped technology, and started looking about to get a job in law enforcement. Shortly then, about 2 years later, I was hired by the City of Benton Police Department, which was the same department that had actually handled the investigation. In fact, the investigator that handled my son's case, or one of them, he wasn't the chief that hired me, but he actually was the chief later that I worked for. And he was, so I got access to a little more information and stuff that.
So the very department that investigated you for thinking that you had something to do with the death of your son totally exonerated that and went on to say he would be a great officer. I want to have him on our force protecting our citizens. Yeah. That had to feel good.
It did, and they knew. I mean, everybody knew. At the time, I knew that my wife hadn't done it. Of course, she was, the kid's mother didn't do it, and I didn't do it. She knew I didn't do it. It just wasn't. But I immediately also, part of why I wanted to go into law enforcement was I wanted to do everything I could to keep other parents from going through what I went through. Mm. And it was also a way to keep my son's story alive. Mm. If I could continue to do things, I could continue to make things happen that would keep showing. That's why I got involved in the DARE program. That's why I got involved in Parents of Murdered Children. That's why I studied predators, and so I could teach in the presentation that I do. I call the Predators Playbook. I tell people, had I known what I teach today when I was 19 years old, my son would probably still be alive today. Mm. He would. Because I wouldn't have made those same mistakes. I would have known different questions to ask. I would have known not to, when things looked like bruises, they were bruises, and I would have I wouldn't have taken it back. With that said, I've been absolutely, after the death of my son, I got involved in law enforcement, ended up with a phenomenal career. At least I think, I'm excited about my career. I even had the state's attorney that prosecuted my case came to me one day and said, Ray, said, you could have allowed this to destroy your life. Mm-hmm. You could have taken a totally different path, but instead you changed your career through DARE. I had 5,200 kids graduate through my DARE program. Taught DARE in every school in Franklin County at some time or another, from West Frankfort to Benton to Ziegler to Sesser to Logan to Thompson. Literally every school in Franklin County at some time or another I had students.
And I want to circle back to that at the end. You told me a story yesterday that you got to tell before this broadcast is over. Okay. But I want to come back to the tragedy for a moment. If anybody's watching right now or watches it later, they're really feeling for you at this moment. Like it's hard to hear. I'm hearing more details today than I've ever heard, right? Mm. And it's just hard to absorb. So I want to come back and try to absorb some of those. And so you were in the coal mine? When did you first know like something was wrong with your son? They said, we're flying him out. Take me back to that day.
Well, that's what they said. They said he's had a head injury. Don't know exactly what's caused it at this point, but he's unresponsive, and he had been knocked unconscious, and that they were in the process of making arrangements for Erie back to fly him to St. Louis Cardinal Glenn Hospital.
What do you think in that moment?
Well, at that moment, I was thinking, obviously, what could have happened? How could it have happened? If he was going to survive, obviously, the first thing that's going through my mind, is the Lord going to take my son? Am I going to, which again, that's everything. The way the feelings become so, I don't even know if I can even tell you, because it's a flood of emotions. It's, did I do something to cause God to be mad at me? It's something, why my son, which became a big focus for my attention for a long time, is why it was my son and not her daughter.
Yeah.
So there were just so many things that goes through your mind. And I wanted to believe it was an accident. I truly did not want to believe that the babysitter did this, because the truth is I tell people, predators don't look like predators.
Yeah.
Not only do they look like everyday people, I mean, this looked like a loving mother that cared for her kids, that had 2 children of her own, from a good family, good home. Our husband was as wonderful a guy as you would meet. In fact, I mean, I felt sorry for him as things went along. Her son, I felt sorry for her son, because, after everything happened, I mean, he even tried to come up to me and tell me how sorry he was, and how, he was going to miss Frankie too. And of course, this was before it came out that his mother was the one that actually injured my son or killed my son. So I wanted to believe that, 1, he was going to be okay, and 2, that it was an accident.
Okay.
So,
Now, you get to the hospital.
mm-hmm.
The doctor says he's not going to make that. More than likely, he's not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor then tells you that the best thing for you to do is unplug, and you wrestle through that, right?
Yeah.
And there has to be some wrestling there.
Oh my gosh! And even today, there are times when I think, did I do it too soon? I mean, should I have waited? Because you hear of parents who waited years and years, and then people have came back and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And well, for one, I was probably young, well, immature at the time myself, but I trusted this team of doctors, and I'm confident that what they were telling me,
Exactly.
he was never going to survive.
Yeah.
In fact, when I first got to the hospital, he had came to. I tried to go in and see him, and of course he reached for me and he was crying, and and of course the investigators are trying to get me shuffled out of there, talk to me and stuff. The doctors are working on him. They're trying to prep him to get on the helicopter, and he was reaching for me, and that was the last time that he made any motion or any movement. But the next time I saw him, he wasn't there. Yeah. And that would have been on a Wednesday. Wednesday night we got to the hospital, and then of course on Friday morning, 2 days later, is when he passed.
So you mentioned a minute ago he passed in his mother's arms and in your arms.
Yeah, I was holding him.
And
Ange was holding him.
And then you have to make arrangements. You're doing a visitation funeral same day. Never in my life have I made arrangements for anyone's funeral. Mm-hmm. And about 3 weeks ago, I watched a friend die, stomach cancer. And I, just in passing, saw his wife and his oldest daughter in a vehicle. We were at a stoplight at the same time, and she rolled the window down and said, "Hey, I'll tell you about funeral arrangements," because she wanted me to speak. And then she said, "We've been out shopping for Justin's clothes." That wrecked me.
Oh, yeah.
Things you never think about. That just wrecked me. So talk to me for just a minute, like anything that stood out about making those arrangements, anything that...
Well, probably the things that stood out with me the most was the support from the little community event, from our place of employment, from family, from even the funeral home director that was he was actually the county coroner at the time as well. He had made arrangements. He had when a child dies or anybody dies in another state, they can't cross that body over the state line unless they're prepared. So he had to be. One, we had to wait for the autopsy to take place, and then after the autopsy to be finished and finalized, they had to embalm him, get him prepped for transportation, and then somebody had to drive up there, get the body, drive it back, and Charles Siegel, and he obviously he had to charge us. But he basically just said, "This is what the casket's going to cost me. This is what there's no markup. We're going to do the services for free. So the only thing I need you to do is reimburse us for transportation costs." and reimburse us for the price of the and you got to buy a casket that's and they didn't have any, so I had to order one for that size, because he wasn't like a stillborn, like an infant, and he wasn't a child. I mean, so he was 9 months old, so they didn't have nothing like that around, so that had to be shipped in. But
so the funeral's over. You're not in law enforcement at that point. Mm-hmm. You're a coal miner.
Yeah.
At 19
20 years old.
You're 19 or 20 years old, mm-hmm. and you've just buried your son. Want to take matters into your own hands, go find this person, make a wrong. I mean, $1,000, 3 nights in jail. Want to go take some revenge out?
It wasn't just me. It was, other members of my family. There was my dad, me. When somebody hurts, people say that, if somebody done this to my child, I would have killed them. I don't know how you kept from killing them. And the truth is, it did go through my mind. I even thought about things. I knew where there was a piece of property, a house, I could see their house from the upstairs. There was a lot of things that I considered. But the truth, and I was mad at God. I never lost my faith. I've shared that with you. I kept my faith through it all. Thought that maybe I'd done something because I'd been raised in a family where the Lord holds you accountable. People don't fear the Lord enough. So I thought, what did I do? And I blamed myself, and I hated hearing when people would say the Lord must have needed an angel better than you, because I thought, how could God need him more than I need? So it was just all those. I was
going to ask you if people said stupid things to you,
and that's probably one of the hardest ones. And I share with you, I had a chapter of parents murder children, and one of the things that people tell me that they hate to hear the most is that God needed him more than you needed him. And so if anybody out there thinking, that's probably one of the things I would suggest not saying.
And I always know this, that God has a purpose in all tragedy. He does, but that's not what you need to tell somebody.
No, and I took comfort in knowing that my son was with the one person that loved him more than me. Now that I took comfort in, and people could tell you I guess I got goosebumps again. People could say that to me, and I took comfort in that, because the truth is there is only one person that loves my family more than me, and that's Jesus. Our Lord loves us, and there's no end to his love. But I did consider taking it in my own hands. My dad, I know my dad truly wanted to, because he had not just lost his grandson, but he had seen how it crushed his son too. So he was seeing, where me, I'd lost my son, but I couldn't see my hurt. Where my dad and my mom, and then of course my wife's grandmother, we've all thought that it did her in. Just within weeks after Frankie died, she died. We lost her. And it was just emotionally, And my dad's mom and my mom's mom and dad, they lived to be. My grandmother my dad's mom lived to be in her 98, 99. One of the last visits I was there to her, she was still talking about Frankie, so I know that it affected my entire family, so.
What questions did you have for God, the 20-year-old Ray Miner? What questions did you have for God back then?
Yeah, why? Why my son? Why not her daughter? Her daughter was there, same age. They was just with a few weeks apart. Why didn't that happen? Why didn't he take her daughter? She's going to get to not only continue to live a normal life for the most part after $1,000 fine, but she still has her daughter. I have a hole that's never going to be filled from that point on. And then I would see other children too, and other parents, and I would see how, especially after I got in law enforcement, and how some parents don't love their children like they should. Our children are a blessing that God gives us, that we should steward no differently than we steward anything else. We have to be good stewards of the things that the Lord blesses us with, and that's our children. And I would see people that were not good parents, that were abusive parents, and I would think, why did the Lord take my child instead of it was a terrible feeling too, because I later realized that none of those other children deserve it either. But
Well, we are definitely going to get on that, but we're not doing it yet.
Yes,
we're going to get on that.
Yeah.
How did you, so you're angry with God. You didn't stop believing and you lose your faith, but you're angry and you have all of these questions. How does Ray Miner cope? How do you cope? What do you turn to? What do you do? How do you cope with this loss when people in the public that you care about over a period of time don't want to approach you and be there for you and don't want to bring it up again because they feel it's not their fault. They just don't know.
Yeah.
And you're trying to cope. So do you give yourself to work? Do you give yourself to a career? Do you give yourself to, so many people turn to so many different things to cope. How did Ray Miner cope?
Well, I think Ray Miner coped in a lot of different ways. Probably some not healthy. I struggled with alcohol some. In fact, there was more than one night I woke up in the cemetery the next morning. So I did that. I did change my career. I did look to dedicate myself to keeping my son's memory alive. But I did struggle with, I had family members removing his pictures from the wall, and I can understand that they didn't want to have it up there anymore, but I wasn't ready to let go yet, so that bothered me. Why did you take his picture down, or why, and then, now with that said, I have no doubt that the Lord was working from the very beginning. He had a lamp on my feet. He put me in touch with, just even the minute that I thought about getting in law enforcement, Sergeant Dobrzinski from the Benton Police Department, he hadn't been involved in the investigation, but he knew it. Very caring individual. He was an instructor at Ren Lake College at the time, part-time. He was what they call a adjunct or a staff instructor. He wasn't a faculty member, but he taught 2 or 3 classes out there. He became my instructor, and later became not just an instructor, but a very close friend, a mentor. I got to know him. I got to serve under him as my sergeant for Benton Police Department. So the Lord was already heading me down this path. And then, of course, I got involved in the DARE program. But yeah, in fact, it was until now, and when I went to West Frankfort Police Department, I left Benton PD and went to West Frankfort. I got to know Don Wilburn, a friend that a mutual friend.
Sure.
And of course, Don, very strong man of God. And he and I worked midnight shift together, and he got to hear everything. We talked about it, and I think that probably that is what, that time with Don Wilburn on midnight shift is what headed me back down the path, bringing me back to the Lord. Like I said, I had never lost my faith. I had never stopped praying, but I had no intention or no thoughts about, I wasn't attending church. I wasn't going to church.
Keep going.
I wasn't doing the things that I probably should have been doing as far as my relationship with the Lord. And again, because probably, truth be known, I was still mad at God. So, but every night working midnight shift with Don Wilburn and him, encouraging me, reinforcing the fact that the Lord was using me and had a plan. All of those things were things that the Lord was doing and working through Don, and I didn't even know it.
Isn't that wild?
I had no idea.
And so, as you started your career in law enforcement, you said something, I wanted to keep his memory alive. You also said, I want to make certain that other parents don't have to go through this. I want to protect other children.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, that's part of why I continue. I sort of got the reputation of being a predator guru, trying to teach parents what to recognize, what to do, what questions to ask parents, and what questions to ask when they're doing those babysitter interviews, and they're involved in, trying to keep their family safe. What are some of the mistakes that I was making? So I was trying to share and through the position I was in. Also, one of the things that, because I had lost a child and had went through that, actually I tell everybody, once you've lost someone and you watch you can feel their spirit, their soul leave their body.
Yeah.
You can. I believe that. I felt the life come out of his body. Whenever I got in law enforcement and I had other parents and other families that lost children, I could empathize with them. I could talk to them.
I've been there. I know what this is like.
Yeah, and I have no doubt that other families found some comfort in that, knowing that, I tell people all the time that sometimes a family just needs to hear somebody say that it's going to be okay.
From somebody who's been there.
Yeah.
And and emphasizes with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So and there was no doubt that the Lord had already started that process. And today, I mean, there's not a day goes by. Well, I probably shouldn't say not a day. There's not a day goes by we don't get to pray for somebody at our barber shop, but there's not a week that goes by, and probably not more than a day or two that goes by that I don't have somebody in my chair or in my shop that's lost a child, and they talk to me about it because they feel like they can.
Yeah.
They know, especially if they know my story. There's sometimes that they talk to me and they don't know my story, and then they later tell me, I knew I could share that with you, and I didn't know why. I didn't, and
it's something you project. The way you carry yourself, the way you emphasize, the way you listen, the way you look at somebody when they're speaking, even if they don't know your background, they just feel comfortable with opening up and sharing it with you. And then when they hear, look, this man has been where I'm at, it gives you equity in their life. It gives you. So I do believe that. And there is we read through the Bible at times, and you'll read stories like Joseph being sold off into slavery, being by his own brothers, right? By being lied about. He was accused of sexual immorality and accused of attempted rape, and he didn't do that, right? And he goes off into prison again, and he has a decade or longer in prison, right? And then he ascends, God in another miraculous way ascends this prisoner to second in command of all of Egypt. If they haven't read the book of Genesis, they need to dive into that. But there's a verse, the reason I'm bringing that story up, there's a verse that says in Genesis, it's the 50th chapter, and it's verse 20, and it's the Ray Miner of the book of Genesis, right? It's the Joseph who didn't do any wrong. He interviewed when I heard that you interviewed the babysitter, it takes away any kind of speculation like, could you have done more? Because you're asking questions and you're trying to make certain you took your mother with you, right?
Visiting the house.
Yes. You're
looking at everything about it.
So this is the Ray Miner. Joseph is the Ray Miner of the book of Genesis, right? He did no wrong, and yet all of this tragedy has happened to him. And there comes a point when Joseph says this. He says, as for you, speaking to the ones that had done evil towards him, his brothers, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about the many people who should be kept alive as they are today. Now, in our conversations, you project that same kind of mindset that God had a purpose in this. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I have no doubt that the Lord had a purpose. The Lord sent me down this path. I've even had my daughter, because after, and I shared with you, I've thought about having a celebration of life for my son now, so that people could see all the wonderful blessings that the Lord has bestowed upon me and my family, and not just my career, but I've had 3 beautiful children after 3 beautiful little girls. In fact, people were hoping that they'd be girls because I had one boss that I'd served for. His wife came up and she said, I was so excited, but I heard it was going to be a little girl because I didn't want you to not that it would take away from Frankie, but I just thought you needed a little girl. But now I've had 3 little girls, not just one, but 3 since then. So I have my son, and then of course Frankie, who's gone with the Lord, and then I have 3 beautiful girls. I now have 8 beautiful grandchildren. Had a wonderful career in law enforcement. But my oldest daughter, when I go and do the presentation, the Predator's Playbook, she says, why do you keep doing that, Dad? You've been doing the same presentation, sharing with people about Frankie ever since she was it's all she remembers. And she said, I don't know why you keep doing that. And I said, I keep doing that for two reasons. One, well, probably even more than two, but one, it keeps that little man alive. That's his story. That's the story that the Lord wants for him. The Lord is still using that little guy today with that story. And two, I feel, as a parent, I am blessed to be able to present that presentation because it's my gift to him. It's my way of saying, I still love you, I still care about you.
You're not forgotten.
I haven't forgotten you. And I do tell people in my presentation, had I known today what I share with parents in my presentations, my little boy would still be alive. He wouldn't have been killed. I would have stepped in, I would have intervened before it got to that point. And the city of Benton would have had a championship football team in 2000 because it had two Miner boys in the backfield instead of one, the high school football team. But I firmly believe that that's my way, because a parent does want to continue to give. I can take him flowers on Memorial Day, on his birthday. I take a Christmas tree out there at Christmas or Christmas of some sort. You can do those things, but to actually be able to give something to your child once they're gone is not. It's difficult. You can do things. We have a scholarship in his name. There are things that and that's why parents do those things, is because I still have a desire to give to him. And this is my way. I tell people when they ask me to come and do the presentation, they're blessing me as much as they say it was a blessing for me to come and speak. But the truth is the blessing is all mine. The Lord has blessed me, and I think the Lord has given me skills for that. And because of the tragedy, I have skills that other parents that haven't had that tragedy, because I've been there.
You mentioned it was hard walking out of the barber. So yesterday, getting my hair cut, I'm holding my youngest granddaughter, Caroline, or Stacy is.
Yeah, what a beautiful blessing, yeah.
And I'm thinking about this, and I'm looking over and seeing Stacy hold that baby, and I'm thinking about that grandchild is 5 months, And you take a pause. We're done. I think we're almost done cutting hair, and you point to a teddy bear, one teddy bear on the shelf in your office, or in your barbershop, and you said that this is the last gift you gave your son while he was still alive.
Yes.
So tell me, where did you get that teddy bear, and tell me about the moment you took it in the room.
Okay, I bought it the Thursday morning at the gift shop at the Cardinal Glennon Hospital, and I obviously, because of the situation, I could not be in the room with him all the time. I could be in there, or Ange could be in there, or my mom, and we had to sleep too. So the Cardinal Glennon Hospital has these little dorm rooms or stuff. So we would trade off, but one of us wanted to be in that was in the room the whole time with him, even though he had no movement. He was literally just laying there. But I wanted a piece of me to be there with him all the time. So I went down to the gift shop. They had the only little teddy bear that I thought looked like a little boy type teddy bear, about this big, and it was brown. And the day that when he was dropped off at the babysitter's, he had a pair of brown corduroy shoes on, which is also on that shelf. So I bought that for him, and I took it up there and was able to put it in bed with him in the room, and it stayed with him until he died. And then just kind of coming back to law enforcement for a second, I'm hoping to tell a story of 3 teddy bears. That's where I go with it. And so you also, not only do you give out teddy bears, did you give out a teddy bear to Frankie, you gave teddy bears out to lots of little kids. Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, they have a program in District 22 where they give away teddy bears and stuff. And throughout my DARE program, the teddy bear is a mascot for DARE. So I still have him. He has been through every DARE class that I've ever taught, sits through the graduation ceremonies and everything, and children hold him. And if you was to look at him, you can tell he has been held by literally thousands of children. But what you'll also see, what's really amazing about him, is you'll notice that he has his arms and his legs, his ears are covered with friendship bracelets. And these are friendship bracelets that the students from my DARE program have made for him and have put on his legs or his arms and stuff like that. And so he sits right next to Frankie's teddy bear. And they're not the same, but they're similar. Mm-hmm. And of course, bear programs have been something that law enforcement has had. I carried them in my squad car. If I had a child involved in a car crash or anything, people donated bears to the district headquarters and stuff, and we would give bears out to children in those type of situations. Or if you had to, for some reason, had to take a child into foster care or something or other, we would have bears to give to the child as a comfort item.
And for how many children do you think came through your DARE program?
Over 5,200 children over the course of about a 5-year period.
Now you talk about a young man like Frankie at 9 months, sacrifice. He's sacrificed. He's put on the altar of God is what's really happening here. He's sacrificed. And God is going to use the evil at that woman's hands to turn you into a law enforcement to protect and serve our community, not only our men and women, but even our own children, to where you're rolling up on scenes, on accidents, and there's children involved, and maybe a mom's died or a sibling's died, and you're handing out teddy bears, and then you get involved in, I want to make sure these kids get on the right path and the narrow path. Let's make certain that these kids don't get into drugs and alcohol, so let's teach this program. You're building a relationship with them. You're not just coming in as a dry teacher, because that's not how you are. You're connecting with these kids. And now I'm thinking back to that barbershop, and there's this third teddy bear. Tell us about this third teddy bear. I saw a white teddy bear.
Yes.
Tell me the story of the white teddy bear.
Okay, the third teddy bear is just that. It looks almost identical to Frankie's teddy bear, which was the last gift that I bought my son. But the difference is it's white. It also has friendship bracelets on it. And it has one friendship bracelet, which is a headband that has a little picture of a little girl on it. And what happened was the last year that I was teaching DARE, I landed in a little city of Logan. They had a little small, sort of, not a one-room schoolhouse, but a multi-room schoolhouse. But it was like first and second grade was together, second and third grades together, or third and fourth is together, and then fifth and sixth grades together. And this would be, Frankie's been gone now about 10 years, 11 years, something like that.
When this happens.
When this happens.
When this event with
then
the
this
teddy bear
happens.
40 years as of today, right? 41?
Well, it would be 31 years.
31 years.
Yeah,
as of today.
because Frankie would have been about 10 or 11 years old. But he'd have been in fifth or sixth grade. Okay. And I'm teaching, and I'm about, the DARE program is 16 weeks long. I'm about 6 weeks in, which means I've been in front of these kids for 6 weeks. I'm starting to get to know who they are and everything. When I'm collecting essays and I'm talking, I'm interacting with this little blonde-haired little girl, and it immediately I realize this is the babysitter's daughter.
No way.
Yeah, the one that was in the house with Frankie. And she knows nothing of who I am. She probably knows very little of the history. She definitely doesn't know that if she knew the history that I was the father of the child that was killed or anything. There's no way she knows any of that. And over the course of the next 10 weeks, I'm not about to tell her, And in fact, even though there was, I for years I thought, why didn't she die instead of my son? So I was doing everything I could just to. I wanted to make sure, and maybe I wanted to make sure she wasn't treated any differently than anybody else.
Yeah.
I felt like that the Lord, she was here because the Lord wanted her here, and I'm not going to be the one to let her know anything. I'm not going to be the one to do it. I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to bring it up. And but fast forward now to the 16th week, the 17th week after the program's over, we have a culmination ceremony where the kids get to come up and we give them a little certificate, and we make it big. We have guest dignitaries that come up, like the mayor of Logan was there, the Franklin County Sheriff was there. I even think that Glenn Pritchard might have been there. I mean, there were senators. People. We try to make the dare because we want these children have made a confession, or they've made a commitment to be drug free, and even if they
big deal,
yeah, and even if not so much drug free, but to make good decisions. Mm-hmm. And I always said that children that come through DARE have a better understanding about decision making and consequences. Even if they later make wrong decisions, they at least understood the consequences. Those more than even some adults do, because I think some adults don't understand the consequences of the decisions they make. So this ceremony's taking place, and my DARE bear's sitting up there, and he's dressed in a suit and everything with all his little friendship bracelets and everything there. And I'm calling the students across, and I call the little girl's name. And she comes up to me, and she gives me a big hug, and she hands me a teddy bear, the white teddy bear. And this little white teddy bear, she has made all these little friendship bracelets, just like the other ones, but she had put them on this teddy bear. And I take this teddy bear and I look at it, and it is the spitting image of the teddy bear that my son had. And this is the child that was the last person to play with my son. Probably took a nap with him that day. There were things that happened that day that she was there with him. Mm. She was in the house when he was killed or injured. And now she's given me this teddy bear, and the top headband has her picture on it. And I pull the picture off, and I turn it over, and before I even get to read it, she says, "I love you, Deputy Miner." And I look on the back of that thing, and it says, "I love you, Deputy Miner, Tara." And immediately, it was like the Lord said, "Ray, see, this little girl didn't deserve to die either. This little girl," it was just a flood of emotion. I did everything. I almost had to stop the thing at the time. And I thought, and even now when I look back at it, 5,200 kids have graduated from the DARE program. 5,200 kids, no telling how many thousands of bears I've given away. And only one child has given me a bear. And it was her. See, the Lord is in the details. All the details.
Yeah.
And it was like the Lord was saying, "Ray, so you've carried this around so many years. You've got to let it go." Mm. And immediately, I'm getting goosebumps when I talk about it, because she was just such a beautiful little girl. She was a sweetheart the whole time I had her. Whatever happened, whatever her mother did, this little girl didn't deserve to have anything bad happen to her, And it took that, and that was the Lord's way of showing me that, Ray, it isn't healthy to carry some of this stuff around, And I've shared that story with some of the people in my barbershop. I have a good friend of mine, Donnie Jones, who has been telling me since he was the first person I told. That day I said, "Donnie, you're not." And then of course Don Wilburn. Those were the two first people I told the story and showed him the bear. And they keep saying, "You ought to author this. You need to tell people this story." Mm-hmm. And I do. I share it because people ask me about those bears, why they're up there.
The story of the three bears, and even when you were telling me, I found out about that bear yesterday at the haircut.
Yeah. And
I didn't say it, but if of all the things that you've given back to the community and all the kids that you've protected, and there's no how do I say this? There's no way that was just random, right? This is the little girl that spent time with your son before he was mortally injured. And it's almost as if all of these years later, God is using this same little girl. It's almost like I know this little girl gave you the gift, but it's almost like God is saying, "Hey, Frankie wants to give you one more blessing."
Ever think about it when you think about it. The probability of me changing my careers, the probability of me teaching DARE, the probability of me being involved, and even for me to end up at that DARE program in that school, I had to change departments. Mm-hmm. When you start thinking about all the complexities and all the variables to land me in that classroom that year, that she was going to be in fifth grade, that Frankie would have been in fifth grade. if people can't look at something like that and know that the Lord, that's divine intervention, I mean, when people ask me, do I know that God exists? God is in the details every single day. And that's just, there are just so many, but that was right there was one of the probably, it was a blessing to me. That's why I keep that little bear. That's why that little bear is up there with the other bears, because it means as much to me now as the other two bears do. And of all the people to give it to me, it was her. Yeah. I mean, any child could have gave me a bear. 51,999 other children could have gave me a bear.
Yeah. And the only bear you received was
the only bear I ever received.
Well, Ray, I'm going to be honest with you, man. The story is amazing, and it really is. It is tragic in every parent, and I'm a parent and I'm a grandpa. When you're talking about vengeance and your dad and the rest of it, I can feel that. Like there have been times in my life where even with our grandkids that there was a moment or two where in a matter of 3 minutes I'm racing across town with a sidearm on my side because a grandchild is in danger. And I'm rushing to that, and that's a whole story for another day.
Yeah.
But I know those feelings. But the reality is God gave you the grace. He gave you the grace to endure the investigation when you were innocent. He gave you the grace to make the right decision in letting your son just go on and be home with the Lord, right? He gave you the same grace to cope with, over many, many years, cope with the loss of your son and still be a father to your other children, right? And then God gave you the grace to look at a judicial system that you didn't understand and say, I'm going to understand this. I mean, you're getting master degrees in these things, and then God opens the door and a pathway for you to serve at the same city that investigated you, and now you get to protect its citizens, and then you just continue to go on and on and on, and it's as if God and I believe this about God, is that as you're faithful with just a few, He continues to give you more and more and more. And that has been your career and your life. Not just a career, that has been your life. Well, you know what I'm saying? That's what you've given your life to.
And my son now serves for the state police.
Yep.
My daughter, the one that was born right after Frankie, the one that said, why do I keep doing that? She has got her law degree, got a Juris Doctorate. She serves for the Attorney General's office every single day, prosecuting people that are doing horrific. In fact, she has a child abuse case that she's working on up in Washington County that she'll be prosecuting next week to be the trial. So she is doing it. My children are servants. And I have no doubt that Frankie is still alive in them. Yeah. And Vanessa and my girls didn't even know him. Mm-hmm. They know him through their dad. Yeah. I think about Frankie. There are people out there today, and I wish we could help them all, but there are people out there today that are living on the streets that if they died tomorrow, nobody would miss them, nobody would love them. Nobody would even know they were gone. Mm-hmm. And they're alive, they're breathing. Frankie is gone, and every day I still love him, I still miss him. Other people love him and miss him. He's still making a difference. The truth is when you look at the impact on the world, Frankie is more alive today than those people are. Mm. He is more alive today, making a difference in the world, than there are some out there that are alive today that are not. And that's the real tragedy. If there is a real tragedy in the story, that's the tragedy, that there are people out there who are alive that are not making a difference. Mm. The Lord wants us to serve. And Frankie, even though he's gone, he's still serving. The Lord's still using him.
I believe that, and I believe that that's a good word for us to end on and think about, is that God has a calling on all of our lives, and there is a purpose for all of our lives. And tragedy, it doesn't disqualify you, it really positions you to do something amazing for Him. Honestly, I was a little apprehensive in just the interview, just because I knew I was going to ask some questions, but I really do want to thank you for the transparency. You've let us see what an injured, so police officers, guys who have firearms training are very, very tough. They're very bold. They're brave. I mean, you had a 30-year career where you have laid your life down. You put yourself in dangerous positions for other people. But then to sit in a chair and show that you're human as well. At this church, at Redemption Church, we don't just say we back the blue. We really do honor the guys and gals that protect us. We believe in them. This world has went woke. This world is nuts. This world is upside down. I don't play with that. I just say there's a right and a wrong, just like the Bible does, right?
Yes.
And I'm a firm believer in what Romans teaches about honoring those who are protectors and providers. And so it's amazing. One of the other gifts that you gave us today is to be able to see what that looks like on the other side, because the world would fashion a police officer as somebody who is just arrogant, rude, demanding, not kind. My son went on a call where a mother had to be arrested and was questioned. Do they need to be in handcuffs? Does this mother need to be in handcuffs when she goes out? She was a criminal, and so it's like when you look at her kids looking at law enforcement, the side they see is you're the one that took mom away. Yeah. They don't realize that you're protecting them in that situation. And so my point is, on one side, the world is just trying to show all the hard parts of the job, and they never get to see a compassionate, caring individual, which is why you get into law enforcement in the first place, right? To help and to protect. And so we get to see that. That's been a gift. But this also is an encouragement, and hopefully it's an encouragement to you. I want you to think about, and you probably have already thought about this, but when you get to heaven, right? Obviously the greatest moment in your life is falling at the feet of Jesus Christ, your Savior, and getting to see Him.
Oh, absolutely.
But then there's going to be another person who's going to walk up to you, and it's going to be Frankie, and get to see your son again and walk with him and worship with him. And there's a song, what a day that will be. Yeah. So guys, if you would, make sure you share this episode with anybody that has suffered tragedy or loss. Anybody that's got their mind bent and thinking incorrectly about law enforcement, and let's just make a difference together. God's love is in the midst of all tragedy, and the greatest tragedy that's ever happened in all of human history is that God's Son died on a cross for your sin, right? On purpose. He intentionally did that. He orchestrated that day and that moment so that you and I could be in relationship with Him, and so. Share this episode with everybody you can. Ray, brother, I appreciate you.
And a quick note.
Yeah.
If my son was here today to talk to me, he would be telling me how glorious heaven is.
Amen.
That's what people say. If I had 5 more minutes with him, if I had 5 minutes, right, he would monopolize the conversation and tell me how that one day, Dad, you're going to be riding a Harley on cobblestone streets of gold.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So.
Well, again, guys, thank you for joining us. God bless you. Thank you again, Ray. I think we're not live anymore.